Hi, Rob Browne and Doug Dean, Kevin Scarbinsky on AU Undercover. Ronnie Sanders out in the infirmary today. He's got the misery. Hopefully he'll be back soon. Guys, Hugh Freeze. I don't know if you heard the audio on that, but wow, it's about time. And, Eugene Asante, a leader, struggled for 2 years, never quit, but he's a leader. Stuff like this, just in my opinion, can set the tone. Kind of like in a 5K, you get off to a great start. You can't get a second chance.
That clip was from the new Netflix documentary, Any Given Saturday, in which they went behind the scenes during the 2024 SEC season, focused on different teams at different points during the year. And they picked a very interesting time to focus on Auburn. It was leading into the Texas A&M game. And obviously a lot had gone wrong.
Yeah.
And Hugh Freeze in that team meeting, again, that's to put it in perspective, before they played Texas A&M. I don't know that I'd ever seen him publicly since he got to Auburn display that kind of passion and emotion and deep feeling. I mean, when he said he read that text from Eugene Asante, who he said had sent him a text encouraging him and saying if that senior group had to go through what they went through the last couple of years to help Auburn get to the point where Auburn becomes what Auburn expects to be. And he said, the text said, sign me up. And he's punching the podium as he's saying it. And then they cut to the players, and particularly Peyton Thorne, who was about to play his last home game. All the seniors were about to play their last home game in Jordan-Hare against Texas A&M. That was real. It felt real. It felt raw. And it felt decisive. To me, it showed a depth of feeling about Auburn that I'm not sure I'd seen before from Hugh Freeze. And, of course, then they went on and won the game. And if they do turn this thing around, and if Auburn becomes the program it expects to be and has been in the past, maybe that Texas A&M game will look back on it as the turning point.
Yeah, I love the way you put that, Kevin. You're such a master of thinking and of insight and translating that into compelling phrases and lines. But as I thought about the Hugh Freeze play, so I've got mixed feelings. I think some messages that coaches give their team, I'd rather it stay between the team, because you sort of you put a target on your back. But you're not going to find rivals of Auburn who are moved by that. Most of them, just the world we live in now, they're going to belittle. Oh, look at Auburn; they've kind of gotten comfortable with losing, and there can be some risk of that. But to your point, Kevin, which is to me the real signal here, that Hugh was authentic. He was kind of vulnerable to his team. He got the help from Asante to do that, and I don't know that it's cause and effect. That Jordan-Hare crowd always helps you find, if you've got any kind of competitive fire, that helps you rise to a different level. But I was at that Auburn A&M game, and the game didn't mean much to Auburn other than finally getting an SEC win of some kind of import. And that was a different team. They came to play. Texas A&M was a better roster, arguably, last year. Their record sure showed that. But if that's the authentic Hugh Freeze, and he can connect with his team like that, he doesn't have to be the most fiery Nick Saban-esque kind of pregame motivator. Not many are, but I think he can go a long way. But at some point, it's kind of like Coach Dye. I remember in 81, that team was not winning a lot, but there was something different. You could feel it. That what Pat Dye was installing we were all going to be very surprised if the wins didn't follow pretty quickly. And I think you're going to see the wins follow quickly for Hugh Freeze this year, as in maybe the 8 or 9 win range.
I think Edmund Nelson is a player that from Tampa who was on that team in 81. Greg Carr was on that team. Of course, he was on that team for several years. He was a redshirt freshman. But that was also part of the class that was ranked 9th or 10th out of 10 in the SEC. And what happened in 81 set the tone. You weren't winning, but the sacrifice, the struggles, the effort laid the foundation, Kevin. And you saw that.
Well, the
That's
parallel, Rob, and
Yeah.
again, let's not let's not get it twisted. Hugh Freeze is not Pat Dye.
no.
Not in any way, shape, or form. Not
No.
as an orator, not as a motivator. Pat was, you use the word, Doug, authentic.
Yeah.
Pat was as authentic as it gets.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
No
the
doubt.
gold standard of speeches from a coach to a team was really that 81 season after the loss at Tennessee, that just kind of a gut-wrenching
Yeah, God.
loss in Knoxville. And Pat Dye gave, and I'm glad they caught that on camera, where he gave that speech.
Mhm.
Some days, guys, you're going to lay your guts on the line. It's not going to go your way, and the only thing you can do is lay them on the line again and again and again.
Yep.
I mean, watching it now, it gives me goosebumps. Just thinking about how he connected with that team. He had that team's command, respect, attention, and it didn't take long before it translated into victories on the field.
Gonna be a lot of days you'll lay your guts on the line.
Yeah.
Come away in.
I don't do
damn
Pat
thing
Dye
you-
impressions, but that was a pretty good one.
Well, I mean, ain't a damn thing you can do about it. But I was at that game.
That was a tough country.
Yeah, no, it
boy right
was.
there.
But no, I wasn't trying to compare Hugh Freeze. I'm just saying he finally did something that resonated with his team that we've seen in public. Now, maybe he's done something behind the scenes, but Eugene Asante, I hope he makes it in the NFL. But if he doesn't, put him on the team as a GA.
he left
a mark. And I told you, Doug, I was with Doug and Frank Duffy at that game last year. And after the game,
was
remember we were over there talking to
unbelievable.
Eugene and some of the players' parents and all. God, as I'm starting to get this feeling, there's competition at most every position, y'all, at Auburn. Hasn't been that way in a while.
No, you
That's
can see it.
that is what's on the surface we're seeing. And when you've got competition at almost every position, maybe all of them, and then the kicking game. I've never seen a worse year for Auburn kicking in my life. If that's better this year, there's 3 wins right there.
Well,
Yeah, and I don't know. It's probably not worth much airtime to skewer the coaches poll.
Awful.
Man, we could spend a whole show skewering it. And then again, they have a chance, some kind of mathematical chance to be right more than they're wrong. And I don't object to Texas and Ohio State being 1 and 2, although I don't think it reflects the departures the Buckeyes had that they've got to reload. It gives a lot of benefit of the doubt for reloading when your opening game is against Texas. But to me, and I won't even make it about Auburn, I think it's lazy that they don't have Oklahoma at least in the top 25. When you look they bring Matif in at QB, he's unbelievable, and Auburn's going to have its handful late September at Norman. And then they bring his coordinator from where he came. That usually translates into almost. You saw it with Diego Pavia at
That's right.
Vanderbilt. So I think and I also don't think there's enough thoughtful analysis at the talent that's stacked up 2 deep in some positions, 3 deep at Auburn, that you don't get. And most of the early preseason polls by thoughtful analysts had them in as much as high as 13. So the coaches poll, they must hand it to a GA or SID to make their vote for them.
You do, though, as you mentioned, Doug, you are starting to hear some positive analysis of what Auburn can be, even from as unlikely a source as Greg McElroy, former Alabama quarterback, of course, does a radio show.
Greg's
does a radio
fair.
show here, and he's so fair. A lot of Alabama fans don't like him.
Yeah.
Because they think he doesn't have enough Bama in him, as the phrase goes. That he is more objective and tries to be as objective as possible as a former Alabama quarterback. And he has suggested that Auburn could be one of those breakout teams this year. Again, look at the roster. That's what we have to. It's so hard to break narratives. It's so hard to forget the last thing we saw. And so, but every year now, more than ever, you're building teams. It's hard to build a program. You're building teams year by year. And this has been going on for a little while in basketball, more so than football. But it's seeped into football just by the nature of the rules now and what's allowed and what's not allowed. So we have to really forget what we just saw and look forward. And that's a hard thing to do. And one of the things, you mentioned the coaches poll, preseason polls in general, or predictions. Everybody has a top 25. Everybody's projecting conference champions. Everybody's projecting playoff teams. And, I've always kind of pushed back on that. I used to hate when people would ask me, or when I was at the Birmingham News full time, and they would say, we need you to predict this or weigh in on that or give us a top 25. Because what's the best thing about college football is that it is unpredictable.
Yeah.
Who among us saw the kick six coming? Who among us saw Gravedigger coming? None of us.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that's what makes it special. And I don't know what this rush to predict. I guess everybody, you can feel good if you get it right.
Wait till 2 weeks in.
Yeah, can we see one game? Can we see Jackson Arnold in an Auburn uniform against another team at least once before we project whether
he might suck?
Well,
I can accept it if he sucks. I'll be disappointed, but it's more likely that with the receivers they're putting around him and what looks like a greatly improved O-line, it looks like he's going to have. We're going to find out very quickly if he's the 5-star we thought he was coming out of high school.
Yeah, and one thing for sure is, in talking to Barry Trammell on this morning's shows, covered Oklahoma for 48 years, they're very, at least Brent Venables was at Media Days, very effusive in his praise of Jackson Arnold. And in talking to Brandon Drum, OU insider, going to need to get him on too, he knows Jackson very well. And I mean, I talked to him a little bit at Media Days. He's not real talkative, but he's pretty damn confident. I think he remembers what happened last year. And now Oklahoma fans are in love with John Mateer. Okay. Jackson Arnold, I think he is on a mission to prove, hey, I'm as good as I ever was supposed to be. Now I've got a receiver room like they have at Auburn. And speaking of that, Eric Singleton, he wasn't on that 101 freak list. Keldrick Falk was, but Cam Coleman, you can't double team both of them. So I think, but I want to, and on top of that, for both of y'all, the running back room at Auburn. Doug, you're the one that got everybody you're the tip of the spear with Darrell Robinson from UConn. Is he healthy now? What do you think? Because Auburn needs a Rudy Johnson to come in this year out of nowhere and take over.
Well, I mean, the thing I observe about the running back room at Auburn is we've been kind of conditioned ourselves to, you get two styles. There's a bell cow like we had with Jarquez last year, and he was unbelievable. And there, arguably Hugh should have not stayed enamored with passing the ball in a few games. You just win a few games, get bowl eligible by handing it off to Hunter more than we did. But that's a whole nother look back story. And the other option is then it's by committee. And this, one of the things that I guess a high class problem to have, Hugh Freeze has got a committee of 5 or 6 that each is a little different. And of all things, didn't have this on my bingo card, Scarbo. Little true freshman from Auburn High, Omar Mabson, is getting the PR, and that he's getting time with the twos. And I'm not saying he's going to. I think when they line up to play Baylor, by the way, it cracked me up. Somebody referred to him as the Baptist Bears, the Baylor Bears. But fans, you got to love fans. But you're not going to see Mabson in the first half in that game, maybe not at all. You'll see Damari Alston, Jeremiah Cobb, and I think prominently Darrell Robinson. But you get into game 3, if they're continuing to see, if they trust this kid and he brings something different to the table. He's 5'9", hard to see behind those O-linemen. Wouldn't it be crazy with all these backs by committee that a true freshman from right there in Auburn starts to look like somebody you can't keep off the field very much?
That's going to be something to watch early, especially, in that Baylor game. You've got such a strong group of wide receivers. And we know that Hugh Freeze in the RPO game, he prefers the P to the R. That's just his nature. He wants to throw the ball, and he's got a quarterback that at his best can throw it, but he also can run it. So is it going to be too much of a temptation in calling plays to lean on that RPO game, to lean on the throw game, because you've got guys like Singleton and Cam Coleman, et cetera, on the outside that can make plays? Is that going to be your default mode as a play caller this year if you're Hugh Freeze? And it was interesting in his most recent meeting with the media, he said one thing about Jackson Arnold is he tends to get a little greedy in the RPO game. And I thought that was an interesting comment.
What do you read into that?
Yeah, that tells me that there's a little bit of hero ball in him, that if there's a chance that, if you could check, you might be able to check down to a back out of the backfield and get a sure 5 to 8 yard gain. But you see Cam Coleman, maybe he has half a step on the cornerback, and you don't necessarily see the safety coming to help, but you're going to take that shot because you believe in Cam Coleman, his ability to come down with the football. So how much do you try to rein in Jackson Arnold, and how much do you let him go to try to make a play and be bold? That's going to be a balance.
And there is a great point. The interesting human behavior, the human psyche is interesting when it comes to quarterbacks, because what has Jackson heard all offseason heading into fall camp at Auburn, that he held Oklahoma fans, media days, they talked about, we like him, we wish him well, except in one game in September, that he would hold the ball too long. So he hears that and he says, well, I want to do the opposite. And so maybe in practice, he's showing that he's a gunslinger, and I like that. But like you said, the fine line between play the high probabilities unless the moment is so desperate that you've got to score. You've got to get it in the end zone, like 4th and 19 if you're Nick Marshall against Georgia. So that's 4th and impossible. Last play of the game, really, if he doesn't hit that one. And by the way, it still amuses me. Ricardo Lewis was not even going for the ball. He just mysteriously went around the two defensive backs as if he knew that the ball might get.
That's a mystery of the universe, isn't it? He just kept running. He didn't pull
up. He just
kept
running.
He didn't say, well, the ball's underthrown, I better stop and come back and try to fight for it. He just kept running.
And you know what? Here's the funny thing about life and football, that he may have just run a terrible route, and just the way it went bailed him out, and he doesn't have to admit that I didn't know where the hell the ball was. But I digress. So I think the reason you have fall camp is let Jackson Arnold play these extremes. There are going to be times where when you've got receivers like Coleman and a couple others that are big bodies that can win 50-50 battles, you do need to, depending on down and distance, score in the game, you do need to let it fly. Sometimes if it doesn't work out, it's like a punt, and you don't mind taking that chance.
Well, Auburn special teams last year probably cost the team 3 games. Alex McPherson lost close to 60 pounds. He's better. Towns Magoo has the leg like a cannon, but accuracy was a problem. You were 12 of 23 in kicks, and the year before McPherson was like 13 out of 13. All right, so
he has not missed a kick in fall camp so far.
And his older brother, I think, kicks for the Bengals. So that right there, that's why I got Auburn at 10. And I'll tell you what.
10 wins, not ranked 10. Yeah. That's aggressive. I love it. If you really, that's what you're seeing. The schedule, if you can get out of September 4-1, the schedule gives you a chance. A chance. That's all you can ask. But
that's based on really the 2 tackles, Mason Murphy and Xavier Chaplin. Murphy came from Southern Cal and Chaplin from Virginia Tech. Auburn hadn't had 2 NFL style tackles on the offensive line in a minute. Okay. And I think that with Connor Lew at center, you've got the makings of a solid offensive line. For goodness sake, Auburn has struggled. I mean, Gus didn't believe in it. And then the lineman that ran in that hurry up, no huddle didn't do well in the NFL. So Auburn was its own worst enemy with the way they were. I mean, Braden Smith didn't mean to, but he said it in the Indianapolis Star, like October of his rookie year. Hey, the offense we ran in college didn't really prepare me, but I was able to catch up. Yeah, when you can bench press 600 pounds and you look like Drago from the Rocky movie, you can do a lot of things. But I'm going to ask both of y'all, back with Jackson Arnold. He's training with Jeff Christensen in Dallas. That's Mahomes' trainer. I know that, but he's back in Auburn now. How much better does he have to be? Does he have to carry this team, or does he have enough options around him? And one of these years, the tight end will catch 7 passes in a game at Auburn. It's going to happen, but you got 12 personnel. What do you think Jackson's going to do this year? I want a prediction from both of y'all.
Kevin?
Well, one thing I'm interested to see is how much does he run because he wants to versus because he has to.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the offensive line, Rob, and particularly the tackles. Can they keep that pocket clean far more often than not and allow him to make good decisions under as little duress as possible?
Yeah.
Because like any quarterback, they're far better when they're not being pressured than when they are. Their percentage goes up when they have a clean pocket. They're accurate. Everything's improved. And that's across the board. So the offensive line is the key to the drill to me. How improved are they as a unit? Because we've seen it with Hugh Freeze's offense. I go back to the Georgia game a couple of years ago in Auburn when they gave the Bulldogs everything they wanted. Tie game with 5 minutes or so left, and then Brock Bowers took over on that last drive, the winning touchdown drive for Georgia. And Peyton Thorne was very effective running the ball that game. Intentional, designed runs that Georgia was, they were crashing so hard on the interior that when he pulled on the read option, there was a lot of green on the outside. And Jackson Arnold has the ability, as he showed particularly against Alabama last year. I mean, he ran for over 100 yards in that game. He didn't throw for a whole lot, but he ran for over 100 when they beat Alabama 24-3. So that, how much does Jackson Arnold run? How much is it designed runs? Does he make good decisions on these RPOs? Does he get greedy? As Hugh Freeze said in the last 24 hours, he has a tendency to do. And here's the thing about all of this. I love the fact that they're playing Baylor. I think we need more, Rob, we were talking before the show. We need more intersectional non-conference games like this. But for Auburn's sake, they would be far better off if the schedule were flipped and Ball State was the opener and Baylor was the second game.
I think you're right. I think what good, smart coaches do with many things, but in this case, quarterback, is make hard decisions about, I use a $5 word, mitigate some risk. I think early season, you can ill afford to let Jackson Arnold take a bunch of shots, run with design runs. They'll do some design runs, but I think he will have clear instructions that he's not to take direct hits from linemen or linebackers, hard, head-hunting safeties. He will escape. Some of his best runs may be when it's just not there and he's got to get outside and get whatever yardage you can, but slide or get out of bounds. If I'm right about that, Freeze will believe that we will have open receivers enough and we'll have a rushing attack with this O-line that we won't have to depend on the quarterback run as much. But when you start to get into the meat of the schedule, mid-October later, maybe you've got, if it's Deuce Knight that's ready to have a serious role, if something happened to Arnold, then I think there will be games where you haven't shown the quarterback design runs much, and you get into a big game that's important to win, and you unveil that. It's sort of what Oklahoma did to take down Alabama. It was Arnold ran for 148 yards in that game, and I don't know that Alabama their defense was expecting that much rushing attack from the QB. So I'll be nervous if they're letting Arnold carry the ball 10 or 12 times a game.
Designed runs. I mean, like you say, Kevin, when the pocket collapses and you're running for your life, you're not going to make good throws when you're throwing off your back foot. That's just the way it is. I mean, look, the last 2 years, Peyton Thorne, Hugh Freeze brought him back a second year. Is that because Hugh Freeze doesn't know what he's doing? Is that because he couldn't find anybody better? Hell.
NIL commitment.
NIL commitment,
perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe a little birdie may have whispered something to me.
Yeah,
along
exactly.
Those lines.
So, I mean, that was a problem. I think the reason I've got higher expectations for Auburn is you look, the one blowout against LSU in 23 on the road in Baton Rouge, gave up 48 points. The first season, the home loss against Georgia. Brock Bowers, best player in college football, breaks free in the secondary, a minute 27 left. That's the difference. Gravedigger. I mean, I still, there's mysteries about, who did what 50, 70, 100 years ago. We still don't know. We still don't know who exactly made that call, but ultimately it's Hugh Freeze that gets blamed for it. But to only rush 2, and really they were playing patty cake up there. Auburn, that first year, 9 wins, possibly 10. Then last year, 3 just off the kicking game. So it's not like Auburn is out there in the wilderness lost with no talent. But I go back to what Jason Caldwell said. I always quote him, part of AU Undercover. He said it on our morning show Sidelines. When Hugh Freeze took over December of 22, that was the worst roster he'd seen in our lifetimes. And some of the greatest turnarounds happen with those kind of stories. That was the worst recruiting class. 4 years later, those guys are getting fitted for rings, okay? Again, the thing about this roster, you've got, in the past, Auburn would have those stud running backs. Now you've got really good running backs, but you've got a receiver room. You got to go back to Anthony Mix out of Bay Minette, Courtney Taylor out of Carrollton, Alabama, Devin Aromashu out of Miami, Florida, Ben Obamanu out of Selma. I mean, is that the fair comparison? And then go way back, Alvin Bressler, Dick Schmaltz, Terry Beasley, Robbie Robinette, those guys. I think that's the 3 greatest receiver classes in Auburn history, Doug.
Kevin, I think, said it earlier, or at least hinted at it. And I kind of embrace it. I'd like to get Auburn to get to the point where they are expected to win, that a bad season is 9 wins, and they're expected to knock on the door. And now, realistically, you feel great about 10 wins. You might prefer to get to 11 so that you get a bye in the playoff. But I think it's going to get exceedingly hard to be a 10-win team in the SEC. But Kevin, has Auburn ever had a monster season that didn't feel like it just came completely out of nowhere? when was one of those?
Well, I could flash back to 88, when they were in the midst of winning consecutive, what was it, 3 straight SEC championships, 87, 88, and 89.
Yeah.
And that 88 team, that 88 team that defense was as good as I've ever seen. I would put it right there with, everybody talks about the 92 Alabama defense. But that 88 defense with Tracy Rocker and Benji Rowland and Ron Stallworth, those guys up front, and the fact that they lost on that last second touchdown pass in Baton Rouge, or they would have played for the national championship
against Notre Dame, my dream game.
And think about, they would have played Notre Dame led by a running quarterback in Tony Rice. I would have liked Auburn's chances in that game. But, of course, that's hindsight.
That was a magical Notre Dame team. I don't know who would have won that one, but I'd love to have seen it.
Yeah, they got some breaks. They had touchdown Jesus smiling on them when they beat Miami that year. That's one of those great 30 for 30s, too.
Is it ever?
Yeah, they Catholics versus convicts.
You saved Jimmy Johnson's ass for me.
I got Lou Holtz spoke at an event and that I was the MC for a couple of years ago.
Rob and I were there.
And that's right. And my goal, you guys know this, and people listening don't, but my goal that evening was to get him to say that. And so, and I set him up, and he delivered perfectly. He gave us the line that he had said that, when they almost had a brawl before the game, and when he went into the locker room and gave his pregame speech. So, yeah, that 88 team, I mean, you just expected 87, 88, 89, even 90, up till the point where the SEC changed forever when Auburn went to Florida and Steve Spurrier said, hey guys, this is a different way to play football. And they threw the ball all over the Tigers that day. But, yeah, you expected Auburn to be good every year then. But as far as, 2010 was a bolt from the blue. 2013, even more so.
Yes.
Coming off the disastrous end of the Chiswick era for them to do what they did in Gus's first year as a head coach.
I've got my friend Pete Cordelli was quarterback coach on that 88 Notre Dame team. I talked to Pete a couple of times last week. He's going to be on the show Monday. We're going to start putting him and Ellis Johnson together. Ellis for defense, Pete Cordelli offense. And I've known Pete over 30 years. He's from Pennsylvania, big Catholic family. Had a brother be a priest. Backbone of America, Pennsylvania, I'll tell you that. Pete recruited, the quarterback. Simeon, the quarterback was from Simeon, South Carolina, Tony Rice.
Tony Rice, yep.
And Pete's got some cool stories about that. He also said when he took a job to be a head coach, it didn't work out at Kent State. Doesn't work out for anybody at Kent State. Al Davis was there looking at Tim Brown. And he said, Mr. Davis, before you go, could I ask you for some advice on if I take a head coaching job? He goes, go ahead, youngster. He said he was in a white warm-up suit, greasy hair, a bunch of pinky rings, Super Bowl rings, I might add. And he goes, what advice? He goes, well, at the Oakland Raiders, we always sign players from winning programs because you can't teach them how to win in the fourth quarter. They got to know it. And, man, Lou Holtz is now 89. And Pete keeps in touch with him. His wife died in June of 2020. But what you just said, Catholics versus convicts, holy cow. That was some of the most memorable games. And I know they'll show videos of it this year when they play. But I'm with y'all. I was at the 88 Auburn game, the earthquake game. The whole game. That Auburn defense went down and won in the swamp for the first time since 1972, 16-0. And it was a struggle. That was the number one defense in America.
Quentin Riggins was all over the field in that game in Gainesville that year.
Huge.
I was standing. Well, you couldn't stand because the seats in Death Valley are so low that if you're on the field as a member of the media, you got to crouch down.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're blocking somebody's view, and they're going to let you know about it.
And you'll get a drink poured on you.
I was crouched down in the back of the end zone, and LSU and Tommy Hudson, they ran the same circle route to Eddie Fuller on third down, and he missed him. They ran it again on fourth down, and the earthquake happened after that. The earth moved, unfortunately, in the wrong direction for Auburn.
A heartbreaker. Guys, before I cut out, I want to throw an olive branch to my good Bama friends because we were talking about Coach Dye, the motivator. God, was he ever. Coach Dye would be the first to say he learned some of that from Bryant. The Paul Bear Bryant quote, you must learn how to hold a team together. I love this. You must lift some men up, calm others down until finally they've got one heartbeat. Then you've got yourself a team. And I'll be watching with great interest early in the early games. Where are we seeing the great coaching? Because with the portal now and NIL, I think we've got more parity than I don't think it's 2 or 3 teams and everybody else anymore.
No.
I think there's enough. It's evening out to the point where coaching makes a huge difference, both the psychology and motivation, and of course, schemes, X's and O's. So that will be fun to watch early season. Good to hang out with you guys. And listen, I got a supply of sockeye salmon for you, Scarbo, and Rob too, as soon as I see him.
I'm ready. Let me throw one thing at you before you go. This is something that SEC numbers guy put out on Twitter. Yep. And these are the kind of stats that'll make you go, holy cow, there's not a domination. There's not a monopoly. South Carolina has more 11-win seasons than the following teams since 2011 because they did it 2011, 2012, 2013. They have more 11-win seasons since 2011 than Florida, Texas, LSU, Auburn, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State. Now, that's how hard it is to win 11 games. Auburn's done it, 16 times in their history that began February 20th, 1892 at Piedmont Park in Atlanta. Auburn 10, Georgia nothing. Hadn't won back-to-back double-digit win seasons since 88, 89. But like you said, Doug, Kevin, when Auburn has these seasons, they tend to come out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
And
I'm not saying that'll be this year, but
I know.
Now if Auburn wins 9 or 10 this year, then that's a good problem. But there'll be an expectation that you improve on that next year. But the schedule will be a nightmare for a bunch of reasons next year.
Yeah.
Well, we don't even know what the schedule is going to be next year.
Fair enough. Well, that Georgia and Alabama will be on the road.
Well, yes. Yeah, that's always a problem. But who knows what the SEC schedule is going to look like going forward. This was a 2-year deal. You're playing the same teams this year you played last year, just flipping the home and road games. But next year is a mystery.
It is.
What's
I'm out, guys.
We'll see.
All right. Thank you, Doug.
Good to see you, Doug.
A few weeks. We're there. See you guys.
Be ready Friday, Doug. Kevin, and again, we're not trying to make comparisons between, a coach like Pat Dye to Hugh Freeze, but
no,
you got to pull your team together. Those locker room speeches when things are not going your way and you're able to hold that team together, they remember that. People remember that. Just like if you want to make the worst decision, ask everybody. Somebody's got to make a decision. You look at, I don't know. Peyton Thorne, probably not in the right offense. I don't think he was born a terrible quarterback. I don't think he was. I think in the right offense, I think he could be successful. He certainly is he's a nice kid. I mean, I've talked to him, you have. And that's one of the things is that when you do get to talk to these guys, you realize, wow, there's the public perception and then there's what they really are.
Well, that's another highlight to me, Rob, of that Any Given Saturday documentary.
Yeah.
And the Auburn focus leading up to the Texas A&M game. And then after the game and the celebration, and they show Peyton Thorne and his family, his mom and dad, at Toomer's Corner. And they rolled the corner.
Yeah.
And that was just a nice personal moment. And then they had Peyton reflecting on his time at Auburn and saying he had no regrets. He's glad he went to Auburn. He despite the struggles, despite the criticism, he was glad that he experienced that. And it showed some, again, that's the best part of documentaries like that. And this one is fairly well done. There are some mundane moments, some that where it drags a little bit. But the most shocking thing to me is the coaches agreeing to be filmed in some of these private moments with their teams. That's the kind of thing that generally you kept behind closed doors in the past, as open as, Auburn was under Pat Dye, where you could walk down the hallway to talk to any assistant coach you wanted if they were available, if they weren't in a meeting. They'd welcome you in to talk. It's a very different game now. But these glimpses that we get where we see if a coach is connecting with his team. Yeah. And we see how the players react. And that was the genius of the way they cut the scene with Hugh Freeze talking to the team before the Texas A&M game, of going and seeing as he's talking, you hear his voice, but then they cut to the players. And they were all paying close attention. They were all locked in on what he was saying. And that showed me something that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, and because you've got to you can't yell all the time because people they tune you out. You better save it for special occasions. And then you've got your strength coach. That's what he's for. He's the one who spends more time with them than anybody. And if we don't hear like we used to about strength coaches, the off-season workouts. We hear about those other distractions. But I think we're on the other side of it. Look at the culture at Auburn as Exhibit A. Auburn's not losing people that they want to keep. Why is that? Is that because they're 11-14? It ain't because they're winning. It's because, as Shug said, ain't none of us bigger than Auburn. And I think that's the only – it used to be, the 3 C's of recruiting before, you know what they were, but the one now, it's campus, culture, coaching. You spent countless hours.
You left that one, cash.
Yeah, well, that's the that's the culture
You
of
left out
cash.
the other C.
Yeah, well, that's a given. But you look what Billy Napier's doing at Florida, just methodical, slow. Boy, he's good for sound bites because he's real slow. I think Hugh Freeze, he's got his health issues he's battling, and he's in our prayers. I think he's also more comfortable because when he looks at the roster now, he's like, all right, I see solutions, not just problems, because solutionless problems will drive a coaching staff out of their minds. So I want to ask you about the defense, in particular, the linebackers. I like this point. Jackson shows up and the linebackers come through. Start with DeMarcus Riddick. That guy, he might be a safety in the NFL. He's that good of an athlete. He's big. He's in the 225 range. What DJ Durkin?
Can move.
He can fly.
Yeah.
He can cover a lot of ground. So you look at what DJ Durkin's doing with the defense. Second year, he's been around a minute. How good does the defense have to be? 30% better, 50% better than last year? Because they were pretty good with an offense that wasn't great.
And that's a big part of it. It's got to be complementary.
Yeah.
The two sides, we don't, we talk about them in silos, but if you're going to have a really good season, they have to complement one another. And I don't mean complement with an I mean complement with an E, as you know. So your offense can't continually put your defense in bad positions. Can't turn the ball over deep in your own end. You can't do that because I don't care how good your defense is. You give the other team, you turn the ball over on your own 30, the other team's going to cash it in for points. Then the question becomes, can you hold them to a field goal rather than let them march into the end zone? But I think this Auburn defense, we focus so much on with the Hugh Freeze team. I think it's a natural inclination to focus on the offense because he's an offensive guy. He's a play caller. He's a quarterback developer. And so we tend to overlook the defense. But if Auburn is truly going to take a step forward this year, I think it's got to start on defense. And I think it will show up in that first game. Usually you expect defenses to be ahead of the offense early in a season before an offense has a chance to really get a lot of reps under its belt and start to gel. They're going to be challenged by that Baylor offense and their returning quarterback and Sawyer Robertson. And the freshman, he was a freshman running back last year. Some people think they've got the best quarterback tailback combo in the Big 12. Some people have picked them to win the Big 12. And we talked about it before here on the show. The scores that Baylor rolled up as they won their last 6 regular season games a year ago, they were putting up big numbers. And again, it was on Big 12 defenses, not SEC defenses. But Auburn is going to be challenged by Baylor's offense in that first game. And can they hold them down? And look, good defense now might be holding a team to 21 points. Yeah. We have to adjust our expectations. You're not going to hold teams under 10 points a game. This isn't 1988. No. You don't have Tracy Rocker and Ron Stallworth and Benji Rowland up front. Nobody does. So, but can you keep it manageable where the offense doesn't feel that this is, again, part of the complementary aspect of it. The offense can't feel desperate. It can't feel like, man, we got to score every time we go out there.
Yeah.
We got to put points on the board almost every possession or we're going to fall behind.
Yeah. You look at, and when Auburn played Oregon in 2010, Nick Aliotti was the defensive coordinator at Oregon. He made a very prophetic comment, harbinger of things to come. He said, the days of the lockdown, manhole cover, shutdown defenses are a thing of the past. That's because Oregon was running a play every 9.6 seconds. And I remember talking to a young man that is a friend of mine. He was on the team working with him. He said, before the game, he said, Auburn is now getting the ability to substitute defense, whatever, in under 9.6 seconds. That's when I said Auburn will beat Oregon. Because you had guys like Nosa Igwe, Antoine Carter, and the big guy from Mobile, Williamson, Nick Fairley, the greatest defensive player in college football that year. And you also had the greatest offensive player. But you had 24 seniors. But without Cam Newton, Auburn's probably 8-4. But you had a lot of veterans. When Auburn walked off the field against Oregon with a national championship, combined number of starts among the offensive line, 176. That's hard to find nowadays together because of all the guys moving around. Kevin, I'm with you about Baylor. They were so strong at the end. Of course, that stopped. You got to start from zero, like at this commission business. You can make 100,000 one month. Next month on day one, you got a 0.00 by your name.
Yeah, there's no carryover.
Yeah, and there's no carry
Not
forward.
on the scoreboard.
No carry forward. So I think for Auburn fans, everybody's you got to get out of this waiting for the other shoe to drop because of what's happened the past few years. Look at the roster and look at the improvement. You know who's really stepping up in practice too is Perry Thompson out of Foley. Perry's a big kid and he can move. Bryce Cain's a little bigger. Malcolm Simmons currently practicing with the team. But here's a guy, I know people have talked about him some, but I asked one of my smart Auburn friends who gets to go to a practice occasionally, who do you compare Horatio Fields to, the Wake Forest transfer? He said, Evan Ingram. Remember him, the hybrid tight end receiver at Ole Miss? I'm like,
Ole Miss, yeah.
Well, that would be nice. And I go back to Jeremiah, Jonathan Cobb out of Catholic in Montgomery, Darrell Robinson, Damari Austin out of Woodward Academy in Atlanta, and then Alvin Henderson out of Elba. And then we talked about the freshman from Auburn High School, Mabson. Competition.
We haven't heard much about Alvin Henderson.
No, we haven't.
All he did was set
almost every imaginable
AHSAA high school record in his state a year ago and in his career. And we've heard more about Mabson among the freshman running backs.
Kevin, nobody does a better job than what you and Alabama Public TV do for high school football in Alabama. I mean, you're to be commended 1,000 times over. How good really is he's 5'9", but I think pound for pound, the best Auburn football player maybe ever was a kid out of Warner Robins, Georgia, who came into Auburn as a freshman in 1977. James Brooks, 5'9", 167 pounds. If you ever want to see how much of a badass James Brooks was, go to the 1979 Auburn-Wake Forest game. Auburn lost that game at Grove Stadium in Winston-Salem, 42-38. Ridiculous loss. But he made a 23-yard touchdown run that I'll put up against about any touchdown run in Auburn history. So 5'9", 160. He got up to 185. He was benching 400 pounds. Look, you can't have the kind of stats that Alvin Henderson rang up, and Penn State wanted him. How good is he? Who would you compare him to for Auburn people's sake?
Oh gosh, I wouldn't even. I wouldn't make a comparison. He did not, unfortunately for him and his team, he did not make it to the Super 7.
Yeah.
In his career, I'll tell you who I would be excited about if you're an Auburn fan. Is Jaquez Wilkes from Wadley, who committed to the Tigers. And Wadley's a 1A school. They won the championship last year. The mayor came on the pregame show with me on Alabama Public Television. She was so excited. Jaquez is about 6'5". He goes about 225, maybe bigger now. It was like watching – it was one of those men against boys kind of deal. He ran for 300 yards. He's probably going to play defense in college. They're projecting him as a linebacker and edge, that kind of guy. But he is all kinds of athlete. And he committed to Auburn not that long ago. So he's someone I saw in person that you should be excited about for the future if Auburn can continue to bring in those kind of guys.
Kevin, as you get closer to, golly, we're 22 days away. Actually 23 days away. Ronnie Brown, Cartersville, Georgia, 23 days away. So you start thinking about the buildup. The scrimmage typically the week before your first game, 10 days out, that's pretty much the tell-all scrimmage. What are you going to be looking for? What do you want to hear from Hugh Freeze and the position coaches, coordinators about this team if you're an Auburn fan that makes you think, okay, they're going on the road, and I absolutely believe and expect Auburn will win versus we ain't got a chance?
Well, they've got a chance. Whatever they say, they're good enough to win that game. They're also capable of losing that game. It's a toss-up, as we've seen, as the line has kind of bounced back and forth within a very small window. I'm most interested in a couple of things. What kind of running back rotation do we see? We've talked about that a little bit. Yeah. Obviously, there's a number of guys that can contribute there, but is one of those guys going to emerge? And then how much tempo do they play? You know, there was a time, and Hugh Freeze has talked about this, his goal was he wanted to run 90 plays a game. But he has matured, and he realizes, and we talked about the complementary offense versus defense equation, that there are times it's better for your team if you do slow down, take your foot off the gas. Then there are other times when you want to go full pedal to the metal and you want to do the bongos as Gus Malzahn used to do when he was on the sideline. Be interesting to watch, see if he does that same thing as the Florida State offensive coordinator in their first game against a team we're familiar with from this state when Alabama goes to Tallahassee. But what kind of tempo are they comfortable with? What kind of tempo works best for Jackson Arnold? So those two things, running back rotation, I'm focusing on the offense, running back rotation and tempo. What are we going to see?
Yeah. Well, and again, I like, Mr. Sip, dangerous conversation right here. Freeze drops the game to Baylor. They're dousing that seat in kerosene. But I see what you're saying.
I would push back on that.
Yeah. Dan could have fired. You cannot afford where we're going forward. You're not going to see head coaches get fired because of this house settlement, because you got to add that $21.5 million on top of all the other buyout. I think what you're going to see is go hire this coordinator for defense, this one for offense, something like that. We'll pay them $2 or $3 million a year. It's a lot cheaper than a buyout. Look what Ohio State did with Chip Kelly. He's a smug, unhappy man, but he can coach football. He's from New Hampshire. He's just, I'm not saying he's the most likable guy, but damn, he's back in the NFL, isn't he? After 1 year at Ohio State. And
the man can run an offense. He can call plays.
Yeah, he's the offensive equivalent as a head coach of what Nick Saban was as a head coach for defense, no matter who the coordinator was. So I'm looking right now. I think DJ Durkin is a very capable defensive coordinator. Auburn's secondary, this is a really strong group, but you got to have pass rush. Malik Blockton, you got Keldrick Falk. You've got some really good players. Compare this defense to the last 5 defenses you've seen at Auburn.
Well, they've got more talent.
Okay.
And I think they've got more playmakers. I think Keldrick Falk is an All-American in waiting.
I do too.
I think he's going to have he did a lot of good things last year, but I think he can take it to another level. And he can be the kind of game changer, game wrecker of an offense that Auburn, that can really propel them to that leap forward from a defensive standpoint, and where the offense doesn't have to score 40 points a game to win.
Yeah. Yeah, because trying to outscore people, it's not going to win you a national championship. I mean, how many times have we seen?
Ask LSU.
Yeah.
Ask Brian Kelly.
Yeah. And by the way, he's doing his best job to imitate Les Miles. He had on the white shirt and the white painter's hat. He looked like an inmate, Saw him at some press conference. He was talking about LSU. I'm not, I think they'll be good, but wow. Jackson Arnold, it's so important. And you've got such competition in the quarterback room, Kevin. We just got a couple of minutes, but I think Jackson Arnold and Deuce Knight, and let's not forget about Ashton Daniels, the kid out of Beaufort, Georgia, who played at Stanford. He's good because he started 21 games. I know it was at Stanford, not against the toughest schedule, but he's going to be really a helpful part of this team as well.
How much do they use the other quarterbacks intentionally? Hugh Freeze was asked about that a couple of weeks ago when fall camp started, and he suggested then that he'd be more likely to use Ashton Daniels as a running complement at quarterback maybe for a package there. But if he had to throw it deep, that he might lean towards Deuce Knight, who's got a fantastic arm, obviously. So how much do they incorporate that into the offense where it becomes a regular thing? Not that they're going to rotate quarterbacks. That would probably be a disaster if they had to do that. But do they have an intentional package for either of the other quarterbacks to get them in the game, get them some reps, show the defense something different, make defensive coordinators down the line prepare for something different? So again, so many things that this is why I can't wait for that first weekend, because then we'll start to get some of these questions answered. Because I think right now, everybody, I don't care, Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, the top 4 teams in the coaches poll, everybody's got questions.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Nobody is guaranteed a thing. Arch Manning is not a proven commodity at quarterback for Texas.
Yeah. And I gotta say this, Rob. He's got great genes. Yeah. Got great genes.
I've heard that phrase being used.
Yeah, I have
talked
too.
around lately.
Absolutely. And look, I like the comments from the Baylor fan. We're familiar with that Baylor program. I no doubt. They're hot. And this is a big deal on the Brazos River in that stadium. It is it's a brand new stadium, I think, that they built in the last 12 years. They're going to be ready for Auburn. Auburn better show up ready to fight, because it's going to take, no doubt, a full 60 to get that win. Kevin, you've got a great show on this channel. You know, I'm telling you, you're putting out great content. This is tip of the spear stuff. And I think Auburn people pay attention. The more you see of Hugh Freeze acting the way he's acting, maybe you're right. You were right. Maybe this is who he really is. Better hope so.
I think this is the year. This is the year we'll find out what Hugh Freeze and this Auburn program are really all about.
Man, what an honor to be on with you. Executive producer Brendan Martin, Doug Dean, Ronnie Sanders, get better. Just dream of Mildred on the beach. You'll get better. Well, that may be a regression, but take care.